Despite facing more than 40% inflation, growing debt, and a sharp decline in its cedi currency since the start of the year, Ghana has agreed on the $3 billion credit deal with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the multilateral lender said on Tuesday.
The land of gold, as fondly called, currently battles its worst economic crisis in decades. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, and Ghana have reached a staff-level agreement for a 3-year loan package of $3 billion. The development means that the agreement still requires the approval of the IMF management and executive board, as well as receipt of the necessary financing assurances by Ghana's partners and creditors. Joining us now is Professor Lord Mensah, Associate Professor of Finance at the University of Ghana Business School. He's a financial economist, PhD Applied Economics from the University of Antwerp, Belgium, and also a financial consultant. Thanks for joining us, Professor Mensah.
Yeah, good morning, and good morning to our viewers out there.
All right, of course, this idea of reaching out to the IMF has been going on for a while, in Ghana. There are people that were skeptical about it. A couple of people didn't trust that it was the right thing to do, but Ghana's government has gone on with it. So please share with us, what this borrowing agreement entails.
Yeah, it is an agreement to put the Ghanaian economy back on its footing. Ghana, for some time now, have been battling with our debt levels, a situation where we had our, Eurobond being priced out, for which, at the end of the day, the government was not able to visit the Eurobond market the whole of last year, which has affected our, foreign obligations as far as the exchange rates are concerned. And so effectively, you could see our exchange rates running all the way to, 15 Ghana cedis per dollar. And Ghana being an import-driven economy, we've had a situation where the exchange rate has fed into pricing of goods and services. And as a result of that, we've been having high inflation. And so it is an economy that, people are struggling here and here there. Because at the end of the day, when you receive your salary, inflation tends to be wiping out, the purchasing power of your, salary. So effectively, things were struggling. And if you come to our homes, the inflation, that official inflation that was being recorded around, 40.5, the typical breakfast table will record an inflation of 100% and over. So we have been complaining about, government measures that are being put in place. And the reason why we're, looking at possible measures that the government needs to put in place was that the government must give the Ghanaian people the signal that they are ready to sacrifice at the government level. And to some extent, the expenditure lines to certain areas of the economy needs to be scrapped or possibly needs to be reduced. So we've been asking the government to reduce the number of ministers, possibly cut, frivolous expenditures here and there to ensure that they minimize, the possible, expenditure lines, so that I will send a signal out there. Giving that signal out there means that government is prepared, and therefore the citizens must be ready to sacrifice. And, the situation becoming unbearable, of course, Ghana is part of, the IMF, fund contributors, and therefore our government want to, seek refuge from the IMF. And we were saying that before the IMF will come, government must send a signal to the IMF that they are prepared to cut down expenditure. But that did not go on well with the government, and the government went on to read its budget by giving the signal that we are going to, cut certain salaries of certain government officials are going to be cut by 30%. So clearly, in-house, we're doing our own, things to ensure that things become normal. Because all boils down to high expenditure lines that the government, try to read in its budget. And then more so, the ability to raise revenue tends to be dwindling, over the past, few years. And so going to IMF, we see it to be a good signal, but then history has not supported, us, because anytime we find ourselves with IMF, we tend to, be financially disciplined, i.e., try to control our expenditure lines against the revenue, reading budget deficits that are very low, which will not call for necessary debt financing and all those. So we think fine. Going to IMF was okay, but we cannot always go to IMF before we become financially disciplined. So therefore, in-house, we should do our own work, should be self-disciplined before the IMF comes in. But, government going to IMF, like I said, was a good thing. There's no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, we ask ourselves, what are the possible, impact of the IMF? And normally, IMF will not fund an economy that is in distress. And so they give the government some conditions. And we're hoping that the government will go through those conditions. The negotiations have been ongoing for the past few days, which they came to the staff level agreement as of yesterday. But the conditions are that government should do debt restructuring. And the debt restructuring obviously is going to affect, and it's going to affect pension funds and all those. Because if you look at our structures of investment, pension companies and pension fund managers are restricted to invest certain proportions of their funds into the government bonds and bills. And as a result of that, this debt restructuring is going to get, going to have impact. So government met the fund managers, met the regulatory authorities and all those, thinking that they've done their job. But then citizens, after the announcement of the debt operations or the debt exchange program, turns out that they are not happy that their pensions will be touched. And whatever the restructuring may be, I believe it was supposed to be communicated very well to the citizenry. Because
Professor
if you don't get a
Mensah,
buy-in,
you're speaking about debt restructuring. I'd like us to focus on that for a bit. And beyond the pensions being touched in Ghana, there's also the local bondholders that have been asked to forfeit or to be ready to take on cuts because the currency is currently struggling. As we know, it had been declared the worst struggling currency by Bloomberg in 2022. Let's talk about the impact of this. Would it in any way impact investment? And what good really is the IMF's $3 billion going to do for the economy of Ghana?
Right. So since the Eurobond market was priced on us, our ability, for the past years, anytime government goes to the Eurobond market, we use it to offset existing debt. And then, sometimes we borrow assets to bring part of it into the country for infrastructural development and other things. But then, since we were priced out of the market, ability to raise the dollar to offset, to settle international bills and coupon obligations has been difficult. And so $3 billion coming into the economy will help in a long way to sustain the government, especially going into the next year where we have some, coupon obligations to pay here and there. But then the haircut that the government is calling for, yes, it is a haircut, but I call it is more or less a debt restructuring where most of the interest payment has been deferred to the latter years, and some of the maturities have been extended. So, especially when you have bond and you are being called to extend your maturity, maybe you invested for 4 years, and government says, I'm going to pay it for, 8 years. Of course, it's a cost to you, the investor, because if the money was to come to you, you could have used it for a purpose different from what the government intends to use it for. And then possibly the coupon payment. If government promised you 20% for 2 years, now they extend, this is just a scenario, they're extending it to, 4 years, but then that cumulative 20% for, that will give you 40%. It's going to be extended for 4 years that you will get 10% over the 4 years. So effectively, it is a debt exchange program. The citizens are not happy, and that's where I was driving to, because most of the investments are pensions investment. And pensions investment, we anticipate that government will keep the pensions investment. Already, pensions have not been yielding, and people are not happy when they go on pensions. And so, having this debt restructuring, they are looking at the impact on the pension fund. But then, for the investor community, you're going to have, that kind of wait and see attitude. because the investors are rational, and every investor who is rational in an economy that is struggling in that manner, they will not like to send their money immediately into the economy. So hopefully, that wait and see attitude is going to be there for some time before things becomes normal, and then we can win the heart of the investors as a country.
Well, that's going to be tough. Looking at what the figures are like across the continent, with regards inflation, and how many of the currencies are doing. Not very many of them are doing fantastic. And of course, Ghana is one of those, that has not been doing very well. So it might be a little tough, convincing investors to come in. But I want to talk about the fears. And this is a popular feeling when getting money from the IMF. A lot of countries always have this fear of failing to meet up with the agreements with the IMF and, of course, being able to pay back. And that, takes you down this rabbit hole of, requiring more and more and more loans and, of course, being at the mercy of the IMF. So is this one of the fears that you have with Ghana? And do you think that Ghana's financial Ministry of Finance is going to be able enough to, of course, meet up with what is expected of them as they take this $3 billion?
Yeah, of course, having a staff level agreement, now the board needs to approve. And the staff level agreement, the board level approval is contingent on certain measures that the government needs to put in place. In the last budget that the government read, they gave some signals of revenue enhanced measures being put in place. They introduced, 2.5, but they introduced some yield levy, some parts last year, which, did not yield as expected. I think they're looking into the reasons why it did not yield. And so there has been some, and then some benchmark values that were scrapped, for importers are going to be removed now. So all those measures being put in place, if government is bold enough to go ahead with these measures, it will go a long way to enhance our revenue generation. But what we're looking out for is the sacrifice of the government to cut down some discretionary expenditures. And they're not being bold enough to do that because of, for political reasons. But hopefully, I think having the IMF on our neck and then be prepared for the 3 billion inflows. Because if we don't get a 3 billion by next year, trust me, the economy is going to, be facing more difficulty. But even having the staff level agreement, this morning, the signals from the staff level agreement has started bringing the exchange rate down. The dollar, which was somewhere, 15, Ghana cedis per dollar. And the announcement, the news I heard this morning, whilst I'm washing down, was looking at 11 Ghana cedis per dollar. So it is a good signal. And like I said earlier, having IMF on our neck, which becomes like a big boss looking into our financial management, has always been good for Ghana. Even though we normally do that by, taking pain for that kind of, control. Right. But in the end, we normally do well with the IMF. So investors will end up having that kind of policy credibility if we sign on to the IMF program.
The money is not coming now. It's good news. It's sort of softened things down. But I think the next question would be, when is the money coming and what the plans are? We certainly wish Ghana the best and hope that they get out of this fix. Thank you very much, Professor Lord Mensah, for joining us this morning on Breakfast Central.
You're welcome, sir.
All right.